Athletes, Coach Blue. Welcome back to the locker room. Athletes, today I want to talk a little bit about common things you're going to experience whenever there's a traumatic event in life. A lot of times we don't realize that significant addiction starts to kind of grasp us and take hold after some kind of traumatic event, something that hurt, something that didn't feel good. And if we don't recognize how those attributes kind of latched onto us and grabbed us and started pulling us down, we're gonna have a real hard time overcoming the concept of living our trauma as who we are. So let's talk a little bit about what some of these things and these issues are as they pertain to common side effects to trauma. So number one, we often talk about replaying or reliving that memory. Whatever the traumatic experience is, and it can be something as significant as sexual abuse, those kind of things, or something that maybe made us feel a little bit more inadequate, maybe even being ridiculed or teased. It doesn't matter, and a lot of times we get stuck on our trauma being like greater than or not as so great as in groups and things, and that's just dumb because trauma is trauma. But when we start replaying those memories and we start replaying them through our heads, we start to develop lies about ourselves and we kind of get in this style of thinking that something's wrong with us. So if you've ever had a traumatic experience, you keep replaying and replaying, these are the indicators that really do take hold to kind of fuel the addiction. Number two, have you experienced nightmares after the traumatic experience? Now, nightmares are interesting because what that does is it puts us in that REM sleep. And REM sleep is what EMDR therapy is based off of, about being able to reprocess and kind of figure out what's going on. But when the trauma is so significant, your own mind's going to try and make it fit into the paradigm or the diagram that you've scripted, which means a lot of times it's going to be scary. And so EMDR therapy actually helps you move through that. And I know a good therapist if you ever need to do that. But nonetheless, nightmares are a big indicator that there's some unresolved trauma. Number three, you often have flashbacks. Flashbacks could be in a certain situation, whether it be a situation or environment or a song or all those kind of triggers we've talked about before. Your flashbacks can occur at a moment's notice. It could be something that someone said or the way that someone said something. That post-traumatic stress floods back through these flashbacks, and it's a very real thing. And for people that don't understand trauma, or maybe a loved one that you're dealing with doesn't quite understand, these things can be quite paralyzing. Number four, you're experiencing a lot of fear and anxiety to some simple things, stuff that most people kind of commonly do. You start feeling that fear and the anxiety and worry about doing them. Something like going to the grocery store or interacting with public or being in large spaces or large crowds. We start kind of thinking that we're the problem, and a lot of it's based off this trauma. Your fear and your anxiety are coming from somewhere. Don't ignore those feelings. Number five, we start having these wild feelings, things like anger and sadness and guilt. These wild, intense feelings as if it's our fault, or we start to react or overact when we're in a situation through anger because we don't know how to properly channel the emotions. When your emotions are set to sensitive high, well, it doesn't matter what, anything could set you off, a loud noise. And a lot of times we don't understand this because we think, well, man, what's wrong with you? We don't really get the fact that we're still reliving that trauma, even if it's something that we've suppressed. Number six, you ever felt numb, completely washed out and wiped out, that you are just kind of on autopilot? Life is not meant, or we are not designed to be like that. So if we're in a situation by which we're completely numb, we're not finding joy in relationships, these kind of situations can give us a sense of feeling numb, like we are just a rag doll being moved with puppet strings. These attributes of trauma are significantly debilitating because what happens is we start to have this false sense of self as if I'm just an instrument for other people to use. Remember, these are all attributes and feelings that we associate trauma with to try and cope with it. We've done it with addiction, but now we've erased that addiction. These things are starting to bubble up. You've got to be aware of these things, athletes. Number seven, spending significant time trying to avoid the situations or the people or things that maybe have caused the trauma. Maybe it's a summer vacation home, or maybe it's a certain place of town, or maybe it's even a certain song or TV show or whatever. We have significant time trying to avoid these situations and really try to not think about them. And every time it pops in, we try to push them away. Instead of processing them, we do our best to kind of avoid it, to put it on a shelf, and to look at it every now and then, but never want to go back there to rectify it because it's going to bring a lot of pain. If you're spending a lot of time just trying to avoid thinking about the trauma, it's time to get some help.